So you want to know how to convince your parents to let you get the pet that you want. Well, today's video is all about the 5 best ways to convince your parents that getting the pet that you want is a great idea. I'm Adam, this is Littlefoot, you're watching Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. First things first, convincing your parents to get a pet reptile isn't always the easiest thing. And believe it or not, I, not that long ago, was the guy trying to get my parents to let me get a pet reptile. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with Steve Irwin. I got hooked on all these reptile shows. I found out you could keep them as pets, and then I went to town trying to convince my parents to let me get a pet reptile. By becoming close enough to an adult that I was being charged rent and decided if I'm paying to live here, I'm getting myself a pet reptile. So that's one way to do it. But if you don't want to wait until you're however old that your parents start charging you to live where you live, there are other ways you can do it, and you want to do it in a respectful and responsible way. Never ever sneak a reptile into your parents' house. It never ends well. They will always find it. You're going to have to get rid of it. It's not good for you. It's not good for the animal. It's not good for your relationship with your parents. So let's go ahead and find out the best 5 ways to responsibly convince your parents to get a pet reptile. I should mention that this is a reptile channel, but this works for all reptiles. When I was a kid, I wanted a dog, I wanted a chameleon, I wanted all these things, and I tried all these techniques, but here's the ones that, now that I'm a little bit older, I think are going to work. So number 5, and probably the most important, is be reasonable. And what I mean by be reasonable is don't ask your parents if you can get a leopard. Don't ask your parents if you can get a cheetah or a koala bear or an anaconda. They're gonna say no more than likely. My advice to you is be reasonable. If you do your research, which is something we're gonna talk about over and over in this video, and you decide that you want a ball python, that's a great option. Or if you want a leopard gecko, that makes sense. But if you want, I don't know, some large monitor or an iguana, that's not really reasonable, especially if your parents are smart enough to know that these are not beginner animals. With that said, get something you actually want. Don't go out and get a leopard gecko even though you don't want one just so you can say that you got a pet. Or if you want, a parrot but a budgie seems to be the most reasonable, don't go out and get a budgie just because. You're not going to have interest in it after a little while, which is something we're going to come back to. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, so just be reasonable with what it is that you're going to ask your parents to get. Number 4, and most reasonable and responsible of all, just ask. And I know this seems ridiculous. Well, I know my parents will say no. Well, maybe, but also maybe they'll say yes, and maybe they'll be open to a discussion, in which case the rest of this list is going to be really helpful, especially for those who actually ask and have open-minded parents. I understand that some parents don't want to listen to you. It doesn't matter what you have to say, even if you brought in your own experienced zoologist just for you, they'd still say no because they can. Get it, been there, done that. I totally understand. However, if you ask, a lot of the times they'll be open to discussion, and then we can move on to number 3. And number 3 is presentation. I know this sounds ridiculous. You do enough presentations for school most likely, but hear me out on this. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint or anything special. It could be. That would really blow your parents away probably. But do a presentation. Show your parents, first of all, most importantly, you've done your research and you know what you're getting yourself into. If, for example, you say, I want a leopard gecko, and your parents say, oh yeah? How do you keep one of those things? And then you stall for 2 seconds, it's over. The conversation's over. At the end of the day, they have all the power, they have all the leverage. You're trying to convince them that you're responsible enough to take care of this thing, and it's not going to negatively impact their life in any way, shape, or form, and it's going to positively impact your life because your parents care about you, but also they care about their own precious amount of time that they have left after they're done driving you around at T-ball and school and working all day. So make sure that this is easy for you, easy for them, and everyone's happy with the end result. And a big sticking point with a lot of parents, I've been there, is the financials of it. Your parents don't want to take on like a financial burden, right? Like you're not going to want a tiger, because that's going to, we're being unreasonable now, but even like a chameleon, for example. Chameleon takes up a lot of money because you're probably going to have to go see the vet. Take on something that doesn't cost a lot of money to keep or start up with, and I'm talking about a leopard gecko, right? And this is under the assumption your parents are going to help you in some way, shape, or form with the finances of the animal. So in your presentation, this is how much it costs to house them, this is how much it costs to buy the animal, this is how much it costs for upkeep. the hydro bill or power bill in a lot of areas, right? Your electricity bill. Figure out what that's going to cost. There's calculators online. This will blow your parents away, by the way. And then food cost. And with the logistics of it too, how are you going to facilitate being able to go buy replacement bulbs if you need to, or replacement electronics for the heating? And how are you going to replace the food, right? Because you're going to need fresh food. If it's a leopard gecko, maybe every 3 weeks because you keep mealworms in the fridge. But if it's something that needs crickets, like a bearded dragon, which I don't suggest for beginners, but neither here nor there, how are you going to get crickets twice a week or 3 times a week or whatever your feeding schedule is? Make sure that you have everything ready to go so when they ask you questions, you've got answers. Something else too, make sure you know the bylaws. Don't go through all this trouble of convincing your parents to get, I don't know, a garter snake, and then you find out you can't even keep that garter snake in your area because it's illegal. I have never run into this problem. But I do know that some garter snakes where I live are not legal to keep. So make sure that your parents aren't breaking any laws by harboring the animal of your choice. And most importantly, once you have all of this, show your research. Write it down, write yourself notes, cue cards for your presentation, whatever. Treat it like a school project that you actually care about. Especially if you're the type of person who doesn't really care about school. I get it, I was that person, or you really do. Either way, put some effort into this like you're getting graded on it and it has an impact on your future. If you're really serious about wanting to have this animal, if you can't put a presentation together for your parents, you're not responsible enough to actually have the animal in the first place. The number 2 best way to convince your parents to get a reptile in tandem with everything else is pay for it. Pay for it yourself. If you're a kid and you don't have a job or you have no financial recourse, there's no way for you to have money. Even if you're doing chores, in my book, that counts as a job, right? Because you're doing enough around the house that you're getting paid for it. Make sure that you have a way to pay for this thing. Some parents, they'll spoon feed you and they don't care if you can pay for stuff or not. As long as you're responsible enough, they're happy to foot the bill. And that's awesome. If you're in that situation, great. All you have to do is responsibility. That's a lot easier. If your parents are the type that want to teach you the value of $1 and make sure that you've got some sort of financial backing of your own, you're making your own money, fully respect that. I was in that boat, and now as an adult, I'm thankful that I was taught as a young person how to make money and that I have to be financially responsible on my own. So if this is you, make sure you have yourself a job. It could be something as simple as, I don't know, a paper route or a flyer route or whatever it is that you do. In this day and age, there's a lot of ways to make money online. So however you make your money, make sure that you can show them that month after month, I'll have enough money to take care of this animal. I've got this much money sitting in my closet in a drawer under my mattress so I can get this thing set up. Have a grocery list, not a grocery list, but a list of things on Amazon or wherever you're going to buy your pet supplies and say, hey, look, this is everything that I need. This is the care sheet that supports this is everything that I need. And here's the cash that I've got in a jar under my mattress that is over and exceeding the amount that I need for this animal. Basic financials, which is going to help you in life, period, but also is going to blow your parents away. And then that whole, well, you can't afford it, you're not going to be able to, you're going to lose the novelty of it, thing goes away, that argument becomes moot. Because if you had enough insight and enough time that you've been interested in this animal to stockpile the cash in the first place, and now you can show that you're going to have enough money rolling in every week or every month in order to pay for this thing, that's really going to shut down a lot of the arguments right away. And the number 1 way to convince your parents to get yourself a pet, any pet that you choose, is compromise. And here's what I mean by this. I should be very clear about this. If you want a ball python and your family says, no, I don't want snakes, but you can get a leopard gecko, don't go out and get a leopard gecko just for the sake of having it. Make sure that if you do compromise, it's something else that you want. I've always wanted several different reptiles. I wanted a leopard gecko forever. The one thing that I really wanted was a ball python, but my mom was terrified of snakes. There's no way I could ever bring a ball python in. And then when I brought a bearded dragon home, once I was old enough and I was paying rent and, you know, I'm covering my costs and I have my own space in the house, that was a little bit different, but it wasn't something my mother was afraid of, and that kind of argument kind of goes away. You're being respectful in that way. So if your parents say, you know what, afraid of snakes, but how about a leopard gecko or whatever it is that you want instead, crested geckos, then be willing to compromise. If you go into the argument, or not the argument, I shouldn't say it like that. If you go into the conversation like, this is what I want, I'm getting it, and if I don't get it, then I walk away and I'm miserable and I'm going to go sulk in my room. First of all, speaks of your character. Second of all, you're never going to get what you want in life anyway. You can always go into it knowing that your parents are going to compromise too and overshoot a little bit, This is a sales tactic coming from a sales background. We used to do this all the time, where you go in shooting for something you know you're not going to get, and then they, well, you know, I'm willing to do this, and that's what you actually wanted in the first place. I wouldn't call it manipulative, but it is very smart, and if you can get away with this and it actually works, you should go into sales when you're a little bit older. So that's it. That's the 5 best ways to convince your parents to let you get whatever pet it is that you want. I want to hammer this home before we leave the video. Be respectful. No matter what, if your parents say no and the end of the conversation is a no, don't bring it home anyway. And of course, make sure that for whatever reason your parents change their mind, you have a place for this reptile, this animal, this bird, this rabbit, this dog, whatever it is, to go just in case. This is another part of the responsibility factor, but that's it. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button already, I'd appreciate it. My name's Adam, this is Littlefoot. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys again in the next video.